Let's look at the business rules table for this process. The context of this process is finding available organs or matching requests against our organs in our database. So, and I've filled everything in here. I've taken the objects, hospital, organ request, and organ, and populated the table with those objects. So first question, for a single specific hospital, how many organ requests might have to be matched against available organs? And the answer would be, could there be one, of course? Yep, could be one. Could there be several? Yep, it's possible. And the third question is it possible that a single specific hospital never has a request that has to be for which we have to find an organ? The answer could be yes, of course. So put the 0 in there, meaning, well, we never have one. Yes, of course. And under what circumstance would that be true? It's because they've never submitted a request. We have that one already. Going on to the next cell in the table, for a single specific hospital, how many organs are reserved for that hospital? Could be one, yes. Could be several, yes, of course, over time. And is it possible that there's never an organ reserved for that hospital? And yes, that's true. Under what circumstance would that be true? Because they've never asked for an organ. And that, again, becomes an event of the hospital doesn't ask for an organ, which is covered off by the absence of an event in the process. Go on to the next one. For a single specific organ request, how many hospitals? Now the context here is matching, or matching organ requests against organs, or finding available organs that match the request. Well, the organ request doesn't match against or find hospitals. Therefore, the answer is NA. We don't have any questions about the relationship between the organ request and the hospital in this context. In some other context, yes, but not in this context. For a single specific organ request, how many organs might we reserve? I've chosen reserve in this case because I don't want to say how many organs might we try to match against, because the answer is, well, a whole bunch, but that doesn't go anywhere. So I'm going to choose reserve in this case. So for a single specific organ request, how many organs might we be reserved for that specific request? Could be one? Yes. Could we have several organs matched to that request? Well, this begs the question is, could we have multiple organ transplants for the same request? And the answer is either yes or no. So you can pick the answer you like. I'm going to say, no, let's have a separate request for every organ, and we'll have deadlines and so on to associate them. And is it possible that a single specific request, never has an organ match to it? And the answer is yes, it's possible. We never did find a match of a healthy organ to that request. Under what circumstance? We didn't find one. We did not find one. Okay? So all of these rules get written up under the anchor object. For a single specific organ, how many hospitals is that organ reserved for? One, could that single specific organ be reserved for more than one hospital? Now, you'd think the answer would be yes, of course. It can't be reserved for more than one. But let's go back here. Remember that we may have received a request from a hospital previously, over here, and then that request can be canceled by the hospital. And once it's canceled, then the request is canceled. Does that mean that an organ could have been reserved for that canceled organ, for the canceled request, I should say? Does it free up an organ that's reserved? And I would think it does. Let's say that we have a request here for an organ. Let's say that we did match it, and now we get a cancellation from the hospital. Not only do we cancel the request, but we actually free up the organ as well. So I'm actually going to add organ to this diagram here, and I'm going to put that canceled there. And knowing that the organ request has been canceled tells us, of course, that the organ that's reserved for it, if there's one reserved, has also been canceled. We don't have to document that as a data attribute. We've just disconnected that in the database. But since I've done that, I've got to add to my narrative on this cancellation one, and I've got to expand my business rules table to add organ. So I'm going to do that here. Now I'm going to add organ to it. I'm going to add organ here. And now I'm going to go through the table in the context of canceling it. For a single specific hospital, how many organs would be, organs that are reserved would be canceled as a result of a request being canceled. And it could be one if one has been reserved for that request. Can't be many, but it might never be any at all. Under what circumstance would that be true? Because an organ has not been reserved for that request. It's only the request which hasn't yet been filled or had an organ reserved for it. For a single specific organ request, how many organs may have been reserved against that request? Could have been one, can't be many. We decided that we're not going to have multiple organs as part of one request. And again, might never be any at all because, as I said a moment ago, none have been reserved for it. For a single specific organ, how many hospitals would cancel the organ? Well, the hospitals don't cancel the organ, they cancel the request. Therefore, we're going to put NA. It's not applicable. For a single specific organ, how many requests have been canceled for that organ? Well, again, hospitals don't cancel the organ, which leads to a canceled request. It's the other way around. So I'm going to put NA there again. So you see how we sometimes have to, not often, 80-20 rule here. We have to go back and modify a diagram, modify the narrative, and modify the table, and add some rules. And we added these two rules, and these two rules, and none here and none here. So it's pretty straightforward. Now going back here now to finding the available organ in the table, we have for a single specific organ, how many requests did fulfill that organ? How many requests fulfill that organ? Well, I think the question is too difficult to work with. So I think we're looking at it from the perspective of the request, not from the perspective of the organ. Therefore, I'm going to say that I don't think that fits. It's not applicable. I'm not going to ask that question. There's another way of looking at this too, and that is, here we're going to match the request to available organs. Well, if I know the request, can I find the organs that have been reserved for it? And the rule here says, well, yeah, if one has been reserved, we have one here. And if one hasn't been reserved, then there'll be no record that's joined to it. So again, it becomes fairly straightforward. You can look at this table as a lookup table, but certainly finds the rules that have to apply.